Good morning and welcome to this morning's episode of the Amateur in the Morning. I am your host, the Forex Amateur. It is the 23rd of November. It's a beautiful, cool Monday morning out here in Durban, South Africa. I hope everybody had a great weekend and you're ready to get back to the charts. If you've been trading over the weekend, I hope you also had a profitable weekend as well. Other than that, let's get straight into it. As you know, on these episodes, I like to break down my view of the synthetic indices market. Obviously, a specific few of those and not all of them. And I also like to speak about, as of recently, the futures market and the NASDAQ equity market as well. So that is exactly what we're going to be speaking about on this morning's episode. But before I get into the reason and the juicy bit that you guys are here for, I have to throw in my little disclaimer in there. Remember, I am not qualified to offer financial investment or trading advice. Everything I speak about on these episodes is purely my own opinion on these markets. I do not recommend a specific trade or action. If you take any trades, remember you have to take it based on analysis that you've done and with cash that you are willing to risk, because the truth is you could lose your entire investment. So let's talk about the volatility 50. First of all, let's start right there. Let me just make sure that I am sharing the correct screen at the moment. Just give me a second. All right, thanks for waiting. So that is the volatility 50. We're currently looking at the weekly chart. Now, there are a few things that I have been pointing out on this chart for quite a while now. And there are a few things as well that are currently happening that I just wanted to point out today. So let's look at over here first, right? So I did speak about this market retesting this trend line last week, right? And as you can see, that actually played out really, really well. I am kicking myself a bit, to be honest, because I did get out right here because that was my objective. But, you know, there's no issue with trading with a plan. So I did get out at my objective. And I did see that, okay, price actually did continue quite a bit more to the downside. So I actually could have doubled my initial objective, which is a bit sucky. But hey, again, let's trade with a plan and rather not just trade to see exactly what happens or just hold and hope and wait, you know? So looking at this area over here, I see this really strong level of support in here where the market could retest again, right? It could retest this level again. Whether it will or not is, you know, very uncertain at this point because it is all over the place. And if you look at the monthly chart at this point, let's just go back up to the monthly chart. You can see that we are in this major consolidation that this market has basically been in since around 2018. So it's been consolidating in this area. We've got one touch at the bottom, one touch at the top, second touch at the bottom, no touch at the top, right? So price came and made a lower high in there. And if it does break above this higher low, then it does reinstate a bearish sentiment to this market. So we can expect perhaps this market to reach quite a bit lower as compared to actually going a bit higher, right? So that's just something that I have noticed. So I am currently in a wait and see stage of my of my trading at the moment, right? Because I want to wait and see if price is able to break above these below these lows and continue a bit lower, right? Because then in that instance we might get a repeat of the sort of bearish sentiment that we've had in the market. So we might see this continue over on this side over here, right? So something to that effect, just simply a continuation of this bearish push to the downside. We might see a repeat of that over here before we see the market go bullish again and then want to trade higher. So currently I am in a wait and see stage. Looking at the daily chart, however, you know, we've got this huge bearish push to the downside. Like I did say on the weekly chart, I actually got out in here because this was my initial objective. And as you can see, this market actually flew quite a bit lower, right? So again, still kicking myself for that every time I look at this chart. But, you know, it's life. You can't really catch every opportunity. Now, there is this sort of bearish channel that I did identify on the weekly chart. So we've got this one, two touches at the top, one touch, and we're currently on the second touch on the bottom. Now, I did have this block highlighted quite a bit earlier as well. And this was basically the area that I was looking to see if price, oh, wow. Okay, right. Well done. Okay, so this was the area that I was looking to see if price can go bullish from around this area in here, right? Because we've got this bit of a channel that was playing out in here, right? So perhaps we'll see a bit of a break to the upside, or even a test, sorry, a retest of this line in here, right? We don't have to take it all the way to the top. So if we do get bullish opportunities off the bottom in here, we will be targeting around this area in here to see if we can get the market back into that area. Then only if we do get a break above that area, sort of breaking market structure at that point, then we can obviously switch our bias back to bullish. But at the moment, it might be a good opportunity to keep looking for sells to the downside, but I'm currently on that wait and see point where I want to see what the market's going to give me. So let's look at volatility 10. Let's look at the daily chart, because there's not really much more that we can speak about on the lower time frames. Now, I have been calling price back down into this level for the past 2 weeks, right? Back when price was still going up at this area here, I did mention that we should see price coming back into around this blue area or around this previous low that it did form in there. And as you can see, we are currently at that point at the moment. I did actually take sales in here last week, and I was actually targeting back into this low in here. So as you can see, my objective has been hit on those sales. Truthfully though, however, I had trailed my stop loss and I did get stopped out on this area here, which is why I really don't like trailing stop losses. But if I'm not going to be on the charts, then I generally do trail my stop loss. So in summary, what I am looking at is perhaps price will try to, gravitate a bit closer to this trend line, but the trend line really doesn't mean anything to me. Once price does hit this blue zone that I've got highlighted in here, I will then be looking to take buys back into this blue zone that we've got on the upside. So overall, I am currently bullish on volatility 10, which I have been speaking about for quite a while. So if you have been following these episodes as well, I hope you've been able to capitalize and make the most out of these opportunities as well, because we can see that we did see this resistance hold really strongly, and that was one of the reasons why I did take a sell off here, stop loss in there, and I was targeting back into this low in here. So that was basically the opportunity that I did see. Looking at today, we should see price still wanting to push much lower, right? So push much lower to this low and below this low, right? So I would be anticipating price coming below this low, giving us something like that, and then pushing back to the upside, perhaps targeting around here for our first objective, and second objective at these previous highs, and then third objective at that blue zone that I did highlight further up on this chart, right? So that's basically my thoughts on volatility 10. Let's move on to volatility 25-1S. Now, 25-1S I have been a bit iffy on for a while, right? Like I have been saying on a good couple of these episodes, is that I am inherently bullish on this market. The reason that I have been bullish on this market is because I've been anticipating price getting back up into this area, right? Now, looking at the weekly chart, you can see that. Let's start over here with this wick in here. Generally, when I see wicks like this, I like to see price come back to fill this wick, because I do believe that when a wick like this is left, there is a bit of unfinished business left at this level, and that also shows in this level in here. And that's one of the reasons why I am expecting price to come back in here. And once it does tap this zone, then I'll be looking to take shorts all the way back down into this area here. So that's going to be a really nice short opportunity that we should be getting at that point, and we are looking at that happening. So let's look at the daily chart and let's have a look at this. So last week I did temporarily switch my bias to bullish based on this breakout of this trend line in here, which we could see obviously still continuing, right? So I do have these arrows marked on here. You might be asking yourself, what's that? So looking at this green arrow that I've got here, this is to highlight the last bit of structure that we've got, right? So looking at this area in here, we've got this market forming a higher low at this point before it formed the higher high above these highs, right? And it then came back and it broke this last higher low that it had formed. So this for me is the last bit of structure that has been broken, and that's currently showing a bearish sentiment to this market. So what I will be looking at to see if price wants to give us some selling opportunities coming off of this gray zone, and then we will be targeting down into this blue zone. This, however, will be short term, right? And short term basically could be anything from a 2 days to 3 days to even a week, right? Because this is a daily chart. And then off this blue zone that we've got here, I'll be looking to go long again on this market, obviously targeting that zone that I did mark higher on the weekly chart. So I will be watching in this area here today to see what we've got happening in there. Looking at the 4-hour chart as well, you can see that we've had this bearish push to the downside, right? And we do have currently what's happening is a bit of a pullback, right? So we will be seeing to see how, or we will be watching to see how price reacts to around these areas in here, right? To see if we can get a continuation of that bearish pushback to the downside overall, because this market has already gone bearish based on this market structure break in here. So I'm thinking that this is just a bit of a switch in momentum to get that momentum continuing back to the downside. If you trade patterns and all of that, you can see that this is a bit of a continuation pattern that is forming here after this bearish push to the downside. And we've got this market structure, which is the current structural high in this market. So we can be watching this area in here. In fact, I'm actually going to mark this area up as our structural high. All right, so that's that. All right, so that's basically my thoughts on volatility 25-1S. Let's move on to nothing else. Oh, volatility 50. Sorry, 75. Let's look at volatility 75. Just give me a second to adjust my OCD waves here because it has to be perfect. All right, so let's look at volatility 75. This I'm so tired of actually talking about this and looking at this market in this area, to be quite frank. Like this is insane what's currently happening. But as I've been saying, unlike everybody else, I like to explain why it's happening, right? It's very important to understand why this is happening. And as I did mention, the price is currently on a major level on the weekly chart, right? You can see that we're currently in the tug of war at the moment, good versus evil, right? So this price is trying to make a decision on whether it's going to give us that short-term pullback based on the daily sell opportunity, or whether it's going to continue in the higher time frame bias, which is currently pulling it towards the upside. So there's currently a lot happening on this chart at the moment, right? And based on what we currently see happening, I am still leaning towards, we would most likely going to see that short-term daily push to the downside, right? Before we continue to see that long-term bullish push to the upside based on this weekly opportunities, right? So I'm just making this look a bit neater, right? So looking at this area in here, which I've been talking about, right? So we've got this bounce on here. Price is still holding above this area in here. We see a lot of wicks to the upside, which is, for me, I like to see those wicks getting filled, right? So we're going to see how price actually reacts off of that level to see whether it wants to continue back to the downside based on the daily chart, or whether it wants to push to the upside, which is the weekly objective at the moment. So let me just highlight this area here. Sorry, I just noticed this now, that it was not marked up. Cool. So looking at this, right, obviously I am looking at price coming to trade back above this high in here. That is why I mark up these highs and these lows. We are short-term we are long-term bullish on this market, short-term bearish on this market based on what's happening here on the daily time frame. Now, I do see that we're going to most likely see this bearish momentum push to the downside for the remainder of this week. You do see that the market did consolidate for a really long time in that area. So it has accumulated a lot of orders, right? Because in a consolidating market, a lot of sentiment is built up in that market, right? Because if you're looking at this market, you can see, okay, price failed to break higher, failed to break higher, failed to break higher. So there would be a bulk of people that are looking at bearish opportunities. Then if you look at the downside in here, you can see failed to break lower, failed to break lower, failed to break lower. So there will be a lot of people with bullish sentiment off of this level and bearish sentiment off of that upper level in there. So right now in this area here, there's a stack of people that are looking to sell off that level and buy off of this level in there, right? So the market is most likely gonna push down to grab these people into the market, right? and then maybe push up and grab those people and pull back before going much higher. So looking at this market at the moment, forget about all of that I just drawn. I will be looking at it coming back down into this low firstly as my first objective, and down into this area in here as my secondary objective, looking at this market, right? So let's move on from that. So short-term sales for the remainder of the week, perhaps, or for the early part of the week into around this area here before we look to take this market all the way up, right? So that's it in terms of the volatilities or the synthetics, I can say. Let's move on to our next order of business, which is obviously talking about the dollar index futures and the NASDAQ equity market. So let me just share the screen with you guys. That has actually been, I've been on point. So if you do trade you know, currencies, or if you trade NASDAQ, you would have been able to, you know, take a lot out of these morning episodes, because a lot of what I've spoken about over the past week that I've been covering these markets has basically come to fruition very, 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 very well, right? So looking at the dollar index, I have been speaking about, firstly, I have been speaking about, let me just grab my annotator. I have been speaking about this low in here, right? And as you can see, that price is still gravitating towards this low in here. So I will be expecting to see price continue down into around this area down in here, and then perhaps pull back to do a retest in this area before continuing back down again into that area, right? So that's what I'm looking at on on the dollar index, right? As price coming down, perhaps a retest or maybe a small break below here, pull back into here, and maybe a push into there, coming to retest some of the structure in here, pushing back down into around that area down in there. So overall, I am still bearish on the dollar index. Let's look at the 4-hour chart to see if there's anything else that we can speak about on here. Not really much more that we can speak about on here. We can see that there is a bit of a consolidation that's currently happening right at this level in here, right? So we can see the market is currently consolidating in that area. So we'll be seeing how that exactly plays out, right? I am still thinking that we'll see it retest this area first before it even bounces back to the upside to retest the structure, as I've spoken about on the daily chart, or even retest the structure up in there before pushing back to the downside, right? So that is my current thoughts on the dollar index. Hopefully that is descriptive enough. And let's look at the NASDAQ. Looking at the NASDAQ, so overall still bullish on NASDAQ, right? So nothing's changed in terms of my sentiment on NASDAQ. I am still bullish, looking at price pushing back up into the top side of this market. Sorry, let me just make this analysis look a bit cleaner. Let's remove this. Okay, that is beautiful. All right, looking at this on the dollar index, so sorry, on NASDAQ. So we're still looking at this market pushing back to the upside, right? Nothing has changed in terms of that analysis. I'm still expecting this market to push to the upside, but we can see that we are currently trapped in this area in here. And for that, let's just drop down to the 4-hour to have a look at a bit clearer outlook of what this market is trying to do at the moment. Now, we're looking at this area in here. What we can notice about this market is that we pushed up in here. We had this big bullish impulse to the upside. We created a high, created a low, created a high, broke below this low right in here. So that is a bearish break to the downside. Now, what I will expect this market to do is this can be a bit of a pullback, right, or retracement, right, perhaps to retest some of the structure in here before we see this market continue, perhaps give us a short-term push to the downside before it continues back to the upside. So looking at this at the moment, in this consolidation, if we see this consolidation obviously breaking to the upside into around these areas here, then we can look for selling opportunities off of this level in here, right? If we see this market break down into the downside, then we can look for buying opportunities off of this area down in here. But me looking at this market at the moment, I would expect it to give us the break to the upside before it pushes down and then goes back up, right? So break to the upside to retest, break back to the downside, and then continuation back to the upside again. So that's my thoughts on these markets at the moment. That's as much as I have to say. Hopefully it's been descriptive enough. Remember, like I always say, if there's anything you'd like us to add, I'm not talking in terms of markets and stuff for us to look at over and above this, because I'm not really looking to extend this session much longer than it needs to be. But obviously, any suggestions in terms of maybe the descriptiveness that I put into the charts, maybe you'd like us to focus a bit more on intraday charts, which I would prefer not to do. But if it's something that you guys are looking at, perhaps we can look at an opportunity in how that can be worked out. But for now, that's it from my side. So until next time, it has been a pleasure as always to share with you guys. So I am wishing you a blessed and a profitable trading day. So I'll catch up with you guys again tomorrow, same time, same place.